Moura and Kleber.
Wagner Moura. And the best director of his hands, the director, writer, and producer of this film, Kleber Mendonça Filho. Thank you.
So the most obvious question first is, what was your inspiration to even start working on this project?
The question can be answered in many different ways, and I have been discussing this since the film premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in May. But it all began with the desire to make a film with Wagner, as working with him as an actor. I had been, we had been in touch for many years, and we wanted to work together. And sometimes you want to work with an actress or an actor, and it's really about finding the right film. So you really have to sit down and write a script, and it takes a while to get it right. And I think after almost 2 years, I finally had something to send to Wagner, and then we did the film. But of course, I also wanted to do a thriller set in the 1970s, and I wanted to use a lot of memories, personal memories, and also bits and pieces that I found while I was making my last film, which is a completely different film, which is called Pictures of Ghosts. You can see it on the Criterion Channel. It's a documentary and a film essay that showed me, put me in touch with so many aspects of history in my city, in the city where I come from, that it enabled me to write the script for The Secret Agent. So that's one way to answer your question.
So I have not sadly seen that film, but I'm curious, is that where some of these stories of the political refugees, the sort of family that Donut's character puts together, is that where that comes from, or was that other research or things that you knew of?
No, that film actually put me in contact with one aspect of the city, particularly the downtown area, and the movie palaces from the 20th century, and it just put me in the mood to write something which would be set in the past. Everything about the plot really came from memories and stories that I heard from my own family, because there's an interesting thing, we remember things ourselves. It's our own personal memory, which I have in this film. I was a little kid in the 70s, as I said. But I think all of us, we inherit, we get memory from other people. It's almost like implants. So some dear uncle or your father or your mom tells you something, and then it's now in a way your own memory, but it was actually something that they saw or they witnessed. So a lot of the story came from newspapers and stories that I heard, and of course it's all fiction. This is a fictional film, and I really love the idea that fiction films, they can be more truthful than some, not all of them, but some documentaries. If you put enough truth into it, even if you have stop motion in some crazy sequence with a lag, even if things get a little out of hand, you can still be very truthful about the logic of the world and the logic of your country and the logic of being human.
Wagner, when you finally got the script, and I know you guys had been talking while he was writing it, what popped the most when you read it the first time?
It's interesting because Kleber and we have been talking a lot about doing something together, and we met in Cannes a long time ago, and then I was basically like really like stalking him to work with me since I saw his film Neighboring Sounds. But I think that what brought us together in this film was actually politics. It was our shared perplexity over what was going on in Brazil from 2018 to 2022. We both were very vocal against the government that was in power back then, and we both suffered the consequences of that. So I kind of knew what this film was going to be about. And Kleber took, like he said, 2 years to write the script. He takes really good care of the script. I tried to read the script, he wouldn't show me the script. He said, I'll only give you the script the day that when you read the script, if you don't like the script, you are an idiot. Yes, he said it. And I'm not an idiot, so I read the script and I really loved. So what for me it was what was even like knowing exactly what the film was going to be about, and even being a big fan of Kleber, because I really am. I've seen all of his films, his shorts, everything. I was amazed by the capacity that he has of like he doesn't follow any rule of script writing, and the characters are so human and so complex. Any little character that shows up in this film is like, I love the fact that you only kind of start to understand what's going on in this film like an hour and a half after, like, when you start to put the puzzles together, it's like, oh, the scene in the movie theaters, oh, so this is what this is about. But until there, you are captured by the characters and the humanity of the characters and the craziness of it all. So yeah, I think that just I'm trying to answer your question. We had a few drinks before this. I think that I love the fact that this is a film, because I myself directed a film that takes place during the dictatorship, and it's called Marighella, and it was about a guy who was a real character, the leader of the armed resistance against the dictatorship. So he was someone that wanted to overthrow the government. I love the fact that this is not about this. This film is about the man who's just trying to stick with the values that he has, which is that kind of person those are the victims, the majority of the victims of a dictatorship, of any authoritarian regime. It's like people that are persecuted just by the color of their skin, or by their sexual orientation, or by the way they think, or their religion. Those are the majority of the people that are persecuted by people like that. So I like a lot that this is a film about a regular man, just a man that, was a good man.
I do have to ask, because you did bring it up, The Legend of the Hairy Leg, which is such a great allegory for what was actually going on at the time. When did you first hear about it, and had either of you heard about it before? I mean, I assume before you got the script.
Well, I first heard about the hairy leg when I was a kid. My mother read from the newspaper, much like Teresa Vitória reads from the newspaper in the film. And she found it bizarre that it was printed as a straight newspaper story, and that was the whole point, because the journalists, they couldn't actually say that the police did what they did and the military police did what they did, so they came up with a hairy leg as an absurdist way to bypass, or maybe to even expose in a transgressive way censorship. And I remember also the nanny saying, behave, otherwise, the hairy leg will come and get you. So this has always been in the back of my generations. Everybody in my generation from his city remembers the hairy leg in one way or another. It was in the radio, it was in the newspapers, it became an urban legend. And for many years I wanted to use the hairy leg in a film, and this is the film finally got to do it with stop motion animation.
Well, I was gonna ask, was it harder to pull off than you thought it would be?
Not really. I mean, well, it was done in 3 ways. First, we shot the empty shots with the actors in the background, and we had a camera on a dolly track. That was fun because the focus had to be where the leg would be, so the background is slightly out of focus. The second thing we did, we had an actual life-size leg. Sorry, leg. And myself and an assistant using green gloves, we would basically attack the actors. Which is one of the most ridiculous things ever, you know, because just a prosthetic rubber leg, hairy leg. And then we were hitting the actors in the face, you know, with the hairy leg. And then the third part was done in Holland as part of our co-production. It was a co-production, Brazil, Holland, France, and Germany. And the Dutch, they took care of the stop motion animation. So they did the stop motion in the studio with which we call the son of the hairy leg, which is a smaller model. And that was added to the original shots we did without the hairy leg. And it seems to work very well. I particularly like when it kicks somebody's ass.
Which is what your hairy leg should do. I also have to ask, I'm so glad we can talk about it for an audience that's seen the film, is you make the really inspired choice to have Wagner play both Armando and his son growing up. Can you guys talk about how that conversation was? Was it something that was just obvious in your head, and what, and also for you, Wagner, how did you want to portray Fernando differently than his father, I guess?
I can give you a very straight and very honest answer. I have in my life been in a situation of meeting the son of someone who passed away. And this also happened to me as a son. And there was something beautiful about the person recognizing you as the son of my mother, or me recognizing the daughter of the son of someone I knew. And I see the continuation of that person in a way. So that's one thing, it's a very true and honest feeling. But the second thing is, I really liked Wagner's character. And then he dies. I never wanted to do an ambush scene for him. I never wanted to put squibs and prosthetic and fake blood and do a, you know, this is him being shot. And I also believe that finding out through a photograph in a newspaper is much stronger and more brutal. But the other thing is, when he comes back as the son, it's almost as if the father continues, which is tricky, because what happens later, it's probably even stronger and more cruel, because in a way the father has disappeared. So I think this is probably the fullest answer I've ever given about that question.
That's true. I've never heard the same.
Had you not heard this before, Wagner?
No. I only, yeah, that was a decision that Kleber took from the get-go, that I was gonna play the son, and we also decided that that was gonna be my last day of shooting because I have to have a haircut. And so I knew that was going to be my last day on set. So I decided not to really think about it, so I only started to think about the son like 3 days before, because I wanted to spend as much time as I could as Armando. So in my mind, I kind of wanted to play his absence when I played his son, because that son for me, it's when I think about him, I think about the kid. I think about the little boy. And for me, that character is all about absence, the absence of his father. This is a film about a lot about memory, or the lack of memory, the collective memory that our country has. It's really sad that, I mean, like, I really like the way Kleber decided to show how Armando died, because I think it's very cruel that it's, for me, he sort of dies twice. He dies because he gets killed, but he also dies when in the newspaper there's the photo, which is very it's horrible. It's a very strong image of a man, like, but also the headlines are like, professor accused of corruption gets killed, and so that is killing the character twice. It's killing him and killing his memory, his reputation. And I can only think about what would that be for a son to grow up without his father, but also with the idea that his father did something that he didn't really do. But I also love the fact that one of the youngest characters of this film, the researcher, the woman that's researching, that comes from the future, is a young Brazilian that cares about memory. You know, we have this thing in Brazil that's like, it's a country with a problem with memory. We had this thing called the amnesty law, for example, in '79, that basically forgave all the torturers and killers and people that did despicable things against civilians in Brazil during the dictatorship. Now, Brazil is finally getting even with this memory when we sent to jail people that attempted against democracy in the country, like military people and the former president that we had. And I find it fascinating that this film, with that character, that's a young Brazilian, that cared, because what she offers him in that scene at the end is memory. What she puts on that table is it's memory. She's like, here, memory. But he can't deal with that, as many other Brazilians can't deal with that. But now I feel that, I just think it's beautiful that this film is encountering a country, a Brazil, that is more in tune with its past. So, yeah.
Last but not least, I just wanted to ask this, just speaking about that, you and I had talked a couple weeks ago and about how the movie has played, it has opened in Brazil, if I'm correct, but that you were constantly surprised by how many young people, and there are many young people who clearly know about it here, were unaware that this era of Brazil that was only 45 years ago, or 40 years ago, that they did not realize it exists. I'm wondering, actually for you as well, has that surprised you, and how important do you think the film is in that context, just as a, even though it's fiction, it's not, it's a narrative story, how important is that, just to have that out in the mainstream media in Brazil at least?
Well, last year I put together a screening of I'm Still Here, about the Stars and Stone and Recife. And right at the end of the screening, you know, as people were leaving, I overheard the three girls saying, I didn't know the dictatorship was so bad. And I thought, this is fascinating, because time passes and things are forgotten. And I think cinema, of course, a good book also, but I think cinema, narrative cinema, is a very strong, especially if you tell a good story, if you're a good storyteller, and if you're truthful, if you're frank about what you're talking about, you can give an interesting take on historical events. And it's a good thing. I feel good about bringing to the table a story which doesn't come from a real life incident, but it comes from an honest depiction of life in Brazil and of history. And of course, the film now is out in Brazil. We're on our 5th week. It has become a blockbuster in a strange way. And there's a lot of discussion and debate around the film. And it's great to see a work of artistic expression just catching fire, you know. It's great.
The power of cinema, love that. Please thank these fantastic filmmakers and their